My name is Wendy Herker, and today I'm presenting my stance on literary instruction. And specifically, I've chosen that a balanced literary approach is most appropriate for me and my children in sixth grade. I teach sixth grade ELA and advanced ELA, and after these several weeks of researching, I've decided that bottom up and top down both have such wonderful and amazing ideas, but not a single one on either side would work for my children. So I've decided that balanced is the way that I would have to go. I don't really believe that either side would work as an extreme. I think that balance would really truly be the key to teaching my children. They need to, some of them really still need to crack that code, and some of them are well beyond that, and they're ready to really start making meaning out of their literature. With my key points here that reading is both a code and a conversation. I also wanted to point out that students need both decoding tools and meaning making to have a really legitimate grounded experience. And the balanced literacy is what I found that can absolutely integrate these two things, and they can have the structure, the skill, and they can make meaning and comprehend their text. I did want to start with the fact that I've learned here, and that reading is more than simply sounding out. You can't just sit a child down and have them decode and sound out words, especially on the level that I teach. And it has to be more than just guessing when they see something in context. It has to be both. My stance is grounded in the belief that students need explicit instruction in the foundational skills, but they also need authentic opportunities to think, connect, and engage with their texts. We've certainly all seen, probably especially in the lower grade, students who can decode really well, but at the end of the page, they really can't tell you what they read. And you have others who can discuss themes all day long, but when you ask them to read or read aloud, they struggle with reading grade level fluently. So balanced literacy is going to address this on both sides of that coin for me and my students. Upside, the more traditional, I guess we would call it, skills first approach. And we had Goff and Tumner's simple view of reading, which is what I spent a lot of this semester, I guess, really getting to know. And it tells us that reading comprehension is the product of decoding and language comprehension. And they placed it in that really neat math formula, if you remember. So if either is weak, comprehension is going to fall apart. We later then learned that Jean Shaw expanded this set with her stages of reading development. And she reminds us that students don't magically jump from sounding out a word to analyzing a complex text, being able to point out the parts of literature. So instruction really has to match where the kids are developmentally. And in sixth grade, this is a little different. We're not just at the beginning stages. So these theories grounded us in the structure and ensure that we don't skip on the basics. So on the other end of the spectrum is the top-down theories. And that was, I mostly looked at Goodman, Smith, and Anderson and Pearson. And they argue that reading is a meaning-driven process. So this means Goodman describes it as kind of a psycholinguistic guessing game. I really did like that term. And it was a phrase that's been debated. But his point was that you use context and prediction, and you use this to make meaning to get your text. So Smith emphasized that skilled readers don't rely heavily on every letter. They rely on patterns and prior knowledge. Prior knowledge was large in this section. Anderson and Pearson bring in schema theory, which is still incredibly relevant today. And students understand their new text by connecting them to what they already know. especially in our curriculum, it goes grade level by grade level. So without schema, this comprehension would actually fall flat. But we do also understand that as I read both of these, that not one nor the other, although both sides have such great points, not one or the other simply alone would help my particular children. So I did try to put a link on here to some of the readings, and I think you may notice throughout my presentation, you'll see some links to several things. Please feel free. That just takes us back to some of the research we've done this semester. Here's their introduction to middle school, and I believe that sixth graders in there in a very critical transition year in all parts of the curriculum, but especially reading. Some are still working on fluency, others are ready to go into Socratic seminars and ready for real deep analysis, and they're often in the same room. I'll have both sets. I can see from their data coming up from fifth grade and their diagnostics, their state tests, show that there are pretty large gaps between how our students score, which means the one-size-fits-all literary approach, it just couldn't work, not in middle school, especially in a differentiated classroom. So a balanced approach can give us the flexibility and tools to address that whole spectrum of children that are sitting indeed in my class. We can look at skill deficits and we can go all the way to higher level thinking, all in that same class. On this slide, I did highlight some interesting YouTube videos that I'd found, one by Sarah Vella, who is absolutely one of my favorites. But if you'd like to take a glance at those, that would be helpful. Looking at all sides of this, there was a lot of reading. And so it showed that when we combine some of these theoretical approaches, the research supports the need for balance, truthfully. The simple view of reading reminds us that we can't neglect decoding. And of course, Charles showed us that instructional needs change as our kids grow. Then we get into schema theory. Super important. It confirms that comprehension depends on connecting new ideas to existing knowledge, hence the way our curriculum may be set up in that fashion. Stanovich's interactive compensatory model, ties this all together. And it seems like when one skill is weak, the other skills may try to compensate. So balanced literacy isn't just like this great new feel-good idea. There is a lot of cognitive science. On one of the slides, you'll see that I linked it to many of the articles that I read, some dating back, which did concern me. But then as I looked up the newer articles, they really tied back to the older principles and then brought it into today's theory and really related. A lot of it was related to data. So I did try to tie in some of those and link some of those here for you. What does this tell us about our instructional implications? And we talk so much in this class, and I'm sure some of you and the others, about phonics, morphology, teaching them the Greek and Latin words, and that's very bottom up. We also learned that we need fluency, and we need our schema activation, which was very top down. We looked at comprehension and then took it all the way into, in this class and others, into writing. So what would this look like in my classroom or in maybe many classrooms? It has to be intentional. We've read about that so many times. It cannot just be random. It has to be explicit. We have to teach phonics and morphology, especially Greek and Latin words in middle school. I like to do a little Greek and Latin word spelling bee with them. Vocabulary is tied to decoding and meaning, but we do need to build their fluency as they are going onwards, up and upwards. We need to explicitly also teach our comprehensive strategies. We need to have think alouds, annotation, and reciprocal teaching. And when we write, because reading and writing strengthen each other, we need to know that balanced literacy has to be structured, thoughtful, and rooted in evidence-based practice. We are getting much of that evidence-based practice from this course and from the readings. I think it's really helped me to hone in and make my instruction very intentional. especially in my differentiating classrooms, while I'll have some groups studying one section, maybe doing more of a bottom-up morphology lesson, and some groups who are Socratic seminar doing a top-down lesson. It's very important that all of it, when I sit down with each group, is very intentional. Another thing, aspect we really discussed, and how to implement that into our classrooms, because it's changing every day. My HMH curriculum that we use has already embedded a lot of technology into their curriculum, including you have a paper text, a textbook, and then the online textbook. Almost everything has a technological type of component to it. And I think this is important because right now it's helping teachers. We're able to do a little more because technology is doing a little more for us. And we're getting a lot of good data, I think, for when they're using the technology, especially when they're using it in their testing. So technology should only enhance our literacy. It cannot replace our explicit teaching. I've used Lexia and iReady. That helps me diagnose where my children are, especially with decoding and comprehension. Newsela and Common Lit really help our students look at some good text at accessible levels, and they're usually interesting topics that they like. Padlet and Flip let them activate schema, and then they can share their thinking, which is very important. And Google Docs is just the all-around lifesaver. It supports all of our collaborative reading. It lets me look at what they're doing, give feedback, discussion in real time. So using this this technology can really strengthen our balanced literacy approach. It does not have to distract with it, which I fear maybe people would think. But I want everybody to know that I've used each of these, and they truly have helped my students, and they let me see a little insight into my students' thinking. A few of the papers that I really liked the most and used for either side of my top up and bottom down theory, they'll also all be included in my stance paper. And I think some people were saying even that they weren't finding too much of modern, some contemporary articles. So I have linked some of these, and I hope that they will be helpful for everybody. And I believe that there are current articles, and the research does back a balanced approach. So if you look at my paper on here that says Salingas found the early decoding and comprehension usually predict later texts, and then the Bogarts-Heisenberg paper proved that teaching text structure can improve comprehension. Especially, there's a bunch of in here that do mention the studies with multilingual learners and how we cannot overfocus on phonics when it comes to that. Language and meaning must be integrated for them. There's also papers that mention schema-based instruction, and it improves transfer. And there's some on the teacher PD and how this affects comprehension outcomes. And I believe, evidently, after reading all of these, it's clear that balanced literacy serves our and my diverse learners better than any single track model could. It's kind of, we seem to, maybe as a whole and my team, kind of gloss over the fact that not everyone is past decoding, the decoding struggle. We just introduced these novels in this curriculum, but we know that this cannot be a reality. So I'll pull a small group for targeted decoding and morphology work, because some students still really need the direct support with multisyllabic words, with the roots, the prefixes, and the suffixes. And this isn't like baby elementary work. It's really giving them the tools that somehow they've missed. Everybody probably has missed a tool here and there, but they've missed this along the way. But they really do need it for their new grade level texts. I look on here as that is my small group. I also look on here as the whole group Socratic seminar. So this is fun when you can get your whole group together and you can really push them into thinking, because they are really at this point controlling the class. It gives them a safe space. They get to analyze text. They get to listen to other people. They build academic conversation. skills and good vocabulary, it shifts ownership of thinking onto them instead of me. They can support their ideas with textual evidence, which is my favorite. It cannot just be opinions. And it's a great balance to have my more skilled readers to use that. Of course, I believe in choice reading. It is non-negotiable if we need our students to become reading. I can't tell you how often they tell me that this isn't interesting or they would have read it. It is hard with our strict HMH curriculum, but I can give them a little control over what they read, which increases motivation and stamina and their investment into their literature because it is their choice. Often it just means shorting, maybe a shorter version of something longer. When they do want to read, they can really improve their vocabulary, their comprehension, and certainly their confidence and their fluency. And choice builds their reading identity, and it really does matter to them what they are reading. I cannot stress that enough. Cross-curricular schema, also very intentional. We work well with that in my school as we work with teams. We're reading content from science to social studies and including the arts in our school. And when they have this background knowledge and this comprehension, you can see their reading skills increase across each of the classes. I like to introduce a schema sometimes before a text, sometimes I wait and I connect it afterwards. Either way, I think it helps them anchor their new information into something they already have. So then they stop reading like they're looking, outside looking in, and they really can read with some understanding. Of course, I love to do individual reading conferences as long as time allows. And this is such a good way to meet with your students one-to-one. And you talk about what they're reading, and I can really get a grasp on what they like for future reading. I can give feedback. We'd like to set goals. We use Beanstack to have reading goals. And I can check to make sure that they really are growing in their comprehension, not skipping, maybe going a little outside their skill level. I like to know that this holds them accountable. I get to celebrate when they're done something really amazing and they finished a group or a group of books. And I think the other thing it does for me in my classroom is it really helps to build our individual relationships with my students because often we can always find something that we agree upon in a story. And I think this really builds a balanced literacy experience in my classroom. I have linked some ideas on here and some videos if you weren't familiar maybe with any of those. And then this one will link, the one that says lesson plans links to an actual lesson plan I use in my classroom for diverse learning, differentiated instruction with balanced literacy. And we use it with the Hatchet novel. Current research continues to back the balanced literacy approach. Slink has found out that early decoding and comprehension predict their success. Both Gart and Heisenberg predict that teaching text structure improves comprehension. Of course, we know it works well with multilingual learners. So this is just a little chart that tells us why each of these is working. Along with many of the articles that I've linked to here, I really truly believe through this very in-depth study this semester that the evidence really is clear and that balanced literacy is going to work for my diverse learners better than trying to single track model of top down or bottom up. Sixth grade is a very important year and I cannot afford to leave anyone behind. So the best way to cover that is to use balanced literacy. It's not a compromise, it's an interaction. Normal Heart, 1977. It's a systematic bottoms-up and meaning-making top-down tool, and balanced literacy is going to prepare my students to read, think, and engage critically, which is going to be important for them when they are now out of sixth grade and moving along in their academic careers. Thank you all for your time. My next slide is simply my references. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to email me. Thank you.